Hey folks, welcome to A Conversation With. My name is Ben Warren. I'm the managing editor of A51 franchise, filling in for Nick Powell's today. But as usual, we have Charles Internicola with us. Charles, how are you?
Good to see you, Ben. This is
Good to
going to be
see you.
fun.
And joining us today is Mike LaRue of Ignite Franchise Group. Mike, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So let's start kind of big picture here. Given the unemployment rate and the number of really talented professionals looking for new careers right now, one might say this is a good time to be in franchise development. Is that a fair assessment? What do you see going on right now?
You know, it's interesting. Obviously there's the investor franchisee component, and then obviously there's a franchisor side. And I think there's three different categories, I think, at both ends. I think on the investor side, there's those who are, maybe tend to watch the media a lot and think the world is coming to an end. And then you got other people who are just kind of waiting and see where they want to put their money. Maybe they've had investments tied up in other places outside of the stock market that may not be doing too well, and they're just kind of waiting to see what happens. And then on the I think those who are on the optimistic side, they're looking. And most of my background has been in the food and beverage side, and so on restaurants have obviously, the industry's been crushed. But I think the same category. There's three different compartments I think a brand will fit in. One, either they're getting absolutely crushed and they are not in the position, or they don't have the leadership to figure out how to pivot. Then you got the middle of the road, where they're just kind of figuring out where they want to go with their development, and they're trying to pivot. But I read an article the other day where it said that pivot is kind of the new thank you, and so they're trying to figure out where to go. And then you got other brands that are super aggressive right now. Real estate, I think is kind of up in the air right now, but I think over the next 18 months, there is going to be an incredible opportunity to get primo real estate at discounted occupancy rates. So, it's obviously an interesting time. Everyone's been talking about, this has never happened before. And I really do believe those who have, those who have empathy in their blood, not just with their employees or their other leadership, but their franchisees, and for the consumers, are going to be the ones that listen to where the brand needs to go, and those are the ones that are going to thrive.
Mike, I love your focus on the investor side, right? And I know you have extreme experience in the restaurant space, developing franchise systems, growing franchise systems. And so I think a focus on, that investor perspective is key. So the other day we had a conversation with some clients that actually control great space in airports, right? And so for the first time ever, right, we get a call. Well, not the first time, but we're always pushing brokers and influencers in that space of, hey, if you have locations opening up, let us know. We want to let our clients know. Mm-hmm. For the first time ever, we're like getting calls like, hey, there's, new wings and airports are opening up in the New York City area, and we're getting calls that there's availability. And I'm thinking to myself, boy, like, now is probably the best time to be planning this stuff out, and we've reached out to our clients and said, hey, we could get you or connect you with someone who could give you space in airports and other stuff. So, I mean, I'm just curious what you think. I think this is not the new norm. So everyone should stop calling it the new norm. We've gotten our asses kicked. We've gotten knocked backwards. Let's get past this bullshit election, whatever side you're on, and we're going to push forward as a nation and fuck all this, excuse my language. So stop planning on, I appreciate everyone who cares about buying a service business that's going to decontaminate things, that's great, but I'm focused on what's next for our clients and brands. And I think there's going to be a reboot in the restaurant industry. You know, like you said, space may be different, opportunity may be different. So I guess after this whole long-winded statement that I'm making, which you inspired, Mike, what's your advice for franchise brands right now? They're in the restaurant space, they're emerging restaurant brands. How do they take this opportunity and look back 12 months from now and say, we're killing it because we did this?
It's great. Obviously, great insight and obviously perspective. I agree with you 1,000%. You know, there's definitely going to be a back end to this. When that is, who knows? You know, hopefully sooner than later. But I would say, I think for emerging brands, I would say tighten up on infrastructure. And what I mean by that is making sure that they have in place what they need to be able to scale. You know, in my just 14 or 15 years or so doing this, I think the biggest mistakes emerging brands run into is not, they know what works in their market, but what works in one market doesn't necessarily translate 1,500 miles away. A big thing is supply chain. You know, a lot of times, you see a brand who will develop in another market, and all of a sudden, you know, their food cost is 10 points higher. And it's like, well, how did we not see this? Well, you know, they might be dealing with the local, local Cisco guy. Not that, talk negative about Cisco, but just as an example, talking to the local, food supplier, and usually that doesn't translate well, 1,000, 1,500 miles away. And so when it comes to food supply chain, when it comes to manuals, systems, what's that? How do you define what that business in a box is? And then I think to touch on an emotional side, and there's kind of there's a back end to what I'm talking about. When I talk about emotion, I mentioned empathy. I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek, and he talks about, start with why and having purpose. And when you're able to sincerely have that in place, you attract those who believe in the same things you do. And so when you talk about empathy, when you talk about community, when I started at Ignite, the whole idea was to our statement was, we believe in positively impacting communities by helping entrepreneurs prosper through franchising. And for franchisees to succeed, the brand has to be built to be scalable. And so for emerging brands that are kind of going through this process that really aren't sure, everyone's talking about, where are leads coming from right now? I can tell you this, there's going to be a significant amount of consolidation in the restaurant space. And what's going to come out of that is an enormous amount of talent. GMs, regional ops, executive directors of operations who are used to being on the corporate end with the franchisor, and I it's unfortunate, but there are brands who that aren't going to be able to recover as well as others, and I think the result of that is. There's going to be a lot of operations people who are very, very good at what they do, who might not be so interested in looking at finding another corporate franchisor to work with. And so, from that, there's going to be an opportunity to, hook up with investors. I mean, there's a lot of operations people that I built great relationships with that have investors that say, hey, if you ever come across something that you feel you can sink your teeth in, let us know. And so I think as things start to consolidate and as the industry starts to pick up again, there's going to be a big talent pool when it comes to operations. And as we all know, you could have the best brand in the world, but if you don't have the right person behind the steering wheel, you could see a 25-point swing, just with two different people operating the same concept in the same world.
Yeah, I'm curious about some of the dangers that might be involved with this larger talent pool that we're talking about. Are there, I mean, in your work with franchisors, are there particular pitfalls you're trying to steer people away from? What are some of the dangers of moving either too aggressively or not strategically enough to take advantage of this new talent pool?
Now, are you in means of like infrastructure or like investing back into your own brand or?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking largely in terms of franchisees, but you're also
Okay.
talking about franchisor level executives and operators.
So, I guess from the franchisee end, and correct me if I'm answering your question correctly, but I think from a franchisee end, at least from my experience, what a lot of franchisees who have experience, what they're looking for is they are looking for brands who have done their due diligence. They understand operations. They understand food costs. They understand labor costs. They understand that when you're in the restaurant business, you're in the people business, and that doesn't necessarily happen all the time. I think there's a lot of fly-by-night concepts that pop up, and they might do extremely well in one market, but you got the new hot franchise, and I think a lot of the sharp operators tend to see through that because they understand that obviously on the franchise sales side of things. It's not about having just the hot brand. You really have to have that infrastructure to be able to scale and give that potential franchisee, the opportunity to know, hey, if I'm going to develop in this market, not only am I going to have the support there, you're going to have the systems to be able to help, support, my group in developing that market, but also that they've done the due diligence in knowing that, hey, based off of your current menu mix, everything's going to translate over to whatever market that I'm developing in.
So Mike, I've been taking notes, right? So if we're backtracking, I'm successful 12 months from now, where do franchise brands want to be, especially in the restaurant space? And I'm loving the advice, right? Because I'm like 12 months from now, we would connect the dots backwards. Probably 90% of the restaurant franchise brands out there right now, pre-COVID, were mediocre brands. They're probably succeeding just from momentum. And whether it's going to be COVID or something else, they're bound to be disrupted, right? And now, so I think it's great for a team to, following your advice is, and this goes for startups, focus on the unit economics, right? The investor side of franchising in the restaurant, which really comes down to what are the unit economics, what are the profit margins, what are the food costs? And then that takes to your second point, which is tighten up your systems, which gets to supply chain, which all funnels right back to unit economics for your franchisees. And then the third element that I think a lot of brands are missing that you're emphasizing, and I'm a big advocate of also, is what's your why, right? What's that passion? Why do you exist? What's the purpose you serve for your customers? What's the purpose you serve for your franchisees? All of this sounds like maybe generic, but when you really dig into this, it's hard work, and it's really the only formula for success. And it really is an opportunity. Because it's, I mean, from the general, like, what is that passion point that your franchisees have? Why are they gravitating to your brand? And when Nick and I have these conversations with franchisees in the field, a lot of times it's not so much about the product, it's about the culture of the team, it's their why, and it's actually, what, ironically, even a restaurant, what that restaurant represents for the community. So I mean, these are all foundational elements that, like, people need to be spending time on this right now.
Yeah, I would actually even take a step further and take that third part, that why, and make that number one. And the reason I say that, and granted, you have to be profitable. You can't just have you can't just be charitable. But I think when you have that right mindset, again, it has to be sincere. It can't be artificial. But when you really do have that strong why and that passion and that you understand that the people are the lifeblood of your business. When you pour that passion into your employees, it transcends into customer base. And I think right now, those who are true to that are going to make the decisions, whether it pivot or I feel like everyone's trying to figure out a way to do drive-through somehow. But understanding what their customers not just want, but need, and how they want to feel when they when they come to your brand. And so, I think when you, I guess it's crazy because not too many people do this.
Mike, but I love that you're bringing this up because the only way you get to understand it is to experience it. And through our mastermind community, I think one quote unquote restaurant brand that did a great job of making me feel their culture was Big B Coffee, right? And what I love is the connection with, if you know the why and purpose you're serving for your customers and your franchisees, getting to the point you just made, that's going to transform the customer experience, right? All of a sudden, that franchisee creates the same culture or a culture with the employees, and that's that extra edge. That's the better service for the customer, and that creates that Chick-fil-A type snowball effect.
So
right?
Chick-fil-A. There's no, their food's good, but they're not as successful as they are because they have the best chicken sandwiches on the planet.
Right.
And they're only open 6 days a week. So I think it's again, it's got to be sincere, and even more now, because I think from a consumer perspective, if you don't have that, you're a commodity. Especially when you look at like third-party delivery and whatnot. When you have that emotional, I think, connection with your employees, with the customers, especially now, you're going to find people who are super freaked out about getting the next virus. You have those who aren't going to care, and you have those who they're going to go, but they're going to pay attention to wherever they're going. They're going to pay attention to, how is this restaurant making me feel comfortable, either going inside or eating there. And I think when you have that why, and when it is sincere, when you have that right, I think, connection, you're going to, and as a brand, you're going to do everything you can to make sure your employees feel safe and comfortable. You're going to do everything that you can to have that, transcend down to customers so they feel comfortable and safe. I'm a huge, you get for the phrase, people will never remember what you do or what you say, but they'll always remember how you make them feel. And I think if you just live by that, I think you'll survive, because you'll figure it out, and customers and your employees are going to stick with you, because it's not about the dollar. It's because they feel good about being a part of whatever you're trying to build as a brand.
Mike, as we start to wrap up here, I want to sort of frame this in a way to kind of pull it all together. And I'm thinking about, how we've discussed whether or not there really is a new normal coming. We've talked about the sort of rush for restaurant brands to pivot. And I'm wondering if you see this all as like a brand new ball game, or in certain ways, is it really just just business as usual, kind of with a twist? As Nick likes to say, does it come down to blocking and tackling, getting those fundamentals right, or should the restaurant industry really be thinking about things in a dramatically different way right now?
It's funny. I saw a local restaurant down here in Southern California. They had a sign out front, basically said, "COVID is like raw cookie dough ice cream. We know you shouldn't eat it, and we know it's not good for you, but we just live life. We just, we continue living on." And, I mean, it's a great question, and I think it's probably something that people have been pondering, day and night for the last several months. And honestly, I don't really know. I feel that the ones who are stuck in their ways and aren't able to figure out, okay, what's going to be not just what's good for me, but what's good for what's good for my employees or what's good for our customers are going to be the ones that survive this. And I could definitely say from a consumer perspective, things are going to change as far as how people view. Is it good? I don't feel things will go back to the way they used to. They might in some. I'm hoping it does as close to as it used to. But I definitely think that there's there's going to be a change. How much I really don't know. What I do know is that there is going to be a back end to this, and I think that the more positive that you can, and more optimistic you can be about, hey, you know what, I can't control what's going on right now. All I can do is control what we do, or what I do, or what we do as an organization, and how we make people feel. And if you focus on that now, regardless of whether or not it gets worse, it gets back to like it used to, 50% gets back to the way it used to. I don't think it's going to matter if the true intentions are there.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty reasonable, if cautious outlook. I appreciate that. Well, Mike LaRue, thank you so much for joining us. This was a real pleasure, and we look forward to checking in with you again in the future and seeing how everything's going.
Awesome. All right, guys. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Take care.
All right. Take care.